All right, everybody, welcome to the Magnetic Podcast. Fresh off the plane. I literally timed it 4 hours and 12 minutes. That makes me a happy man. I don't know if you know winters in South Dakota, where I'm from. They get to about negative 20 degrees. I am going to be spending some of this winter down in the Scottsdale and Phoenix area, probably a total of about 30, 40 days. But trust me, those are 30 to 40 days that I wouldn't miss. But I also wasn't going to cancel this because I looked at my calendar. I was like, well, Remington and I have already had to reschedule. He's a guy I really admire in the RevOps space, and he knows how to produce content that's different because it needs to engage people maybe outside of just his story in a way that they can see the value of RevOps. We surely at Magnetic see the value of RevOps. It's a part of what we do to support it. And Remington is someone who I probably once a month ping and say, hey, what do you think of this? And I'm probably one of 100 people who do that. He's very well respected. He's an up and coming RevOps, call it ninja, but also someone who speaks at conferences like Unleash with Outreach. Remington, welcome to the Magnetic Podcast.
Hey, you're too nice, Steve. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Excited to talk through this today.
Yeah, and it's different topic we talked about because normally you're probably presenting much more of a technical angle or this idea of RevOps and the function of SaaS or software. And today we're going to talk about you and your sort of belief system around content, where you got your start. And that's how I first got to know you. I was introduced to you by some other people in the space. Went and saw some of your content and said, hey, this kid knows what's going on. And by kid, I mean like you were a little kid at the time. And that was only 3 years ago. You looked like, I was like, this kid looks like he's got a baby face, but he's really, really smart. Really smart. But bring us back to this point of like, we're going to wind into what you're doing now a little bit differently, but like bring me back first and then we'll get to present day. When did you first start posting content, Remington, on LinkedIn?
I think it starts with I was in a process of trying to figure out how to get into operations, and I was not having very much success. Didn't work to get into operations at Inside Sales, didn't work to get into operations at Lucidchart. Finally, at Workfront, I made a business case while I was in my philosophy class, business ethics class, of like, here's a service project I have to do for class. Here's all the things that I feel like you guys need to change that would be really good for you to change. And it led to a job opportunity in operations there because they were like, yeah, why don't you just come and fix all the things yourself? And at that point, I actually started posting more questions, like things that I felt like I didn't have answers to that I needed to find people who did. I started going on communities, Wizard of Operations community, as well as the Rev Genius community, the Hype Cycle community. And I started realizing like everybody had the same question. How should we handle our sequences? How should we handle our way of doing content? And the steps that are in those sequences, how many people go in per day? How should activity look? So I think when I started posting, it was out of like, I'm trying to learn because I was coming from an SDR background, and it evolved into I was getting the questions about the same things over and over and over. And I started to see the dimensions come around a problem that hadn't been fully fleshed out. So that was probably like 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And since then, we've created some really interesting content around those topics using data more than anything. Like we actually have a data driven content creation strategy that isn't, I look at how many people look at my content. It's I use the calculations of their actual data to create personalized content for them so that when they look at the content, they're seeing their actual sequence with AI built out in a way that they can understand, like, oh, I should go and change this. So it just kind of has evolved over time, I guess.
Yeah,
But
so
3 years
like
ago.
let let's stop there because this is going to get into what you do present day, but that would be considered a technographic drop. Is that correct? Or maybe that is one form of what you might be talking about.
Yeah, that's something like that. Yeah, whatever. I don't know the words for it, but that's a cool name I could steal for sure.
Okay, all right. So 3 years ago, there's this idea when I had an agency that we could use the data or the technology that was specific to them. So what you're saying is, if somebody, for example, used outreach and then somebody used sales law, but everybody was labeled as such in my systems, and we were able to pull that, then I can use that as content and go out and personalize that based off of what I know.
So we, for an example, at Unleash recently, we did this as a we called it the Genius Bar. Like the Apple Genius Bar. Come and get some help with your sequence. You give us a really small snippet of text from off the page. We run it through AI and in an automated process, update a spreadsheet that then updates a slide deck, and then we can send you that slide deck. So it's easy for you to get the data and the whole explanation
I see.
about like your sequence. It's just content that's maybe a little different than what you would expect, because it does require somebody to like be engaged with us. But typically when people get asked, do you want a free predictive analytics sample about something you've probably been trying to figure out, how do I optimize my sequences? The answer is like, hell yeah, where can I find that sort of thing? So that's one thing. I also think though, I've spent a lot of time trying to post around elements of more like theoretical things that turn into tactical application. So a topic or question a lot of people have, and then narrow it down into here's like 5 or 6 things you can do right now that help change that. So having issues with analyzing something in your system, the question you have to ask is this versus this. So it's kind of philosophical, and then turn it into a tactical layout of what you could do. I love doing posts like that too.
So you're talking about a breakout where people can act immediately. Like you're giving them information that I can choose to maybe click on a link or go to whatever it is and implement immediately. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to actually build and give some people the ability to just do on our site without having to even talk with us right now. It's a little harder to do that because the AI involved is kind of tricky, and we got to make sure that people give us the right data. But I think we're pretty close to anybody being able to get a free sample analysis as something that's just super easy for them to plug in and get sent to them right away.
Okay, so let's back into this a little more unconventional, but now we arrive at what you're doing today. So you started making content a couple of years ago. You started getting involved in the communities. You mentioned Rev Genius stuck out to me there. Um, Wizard of Ops, I believe, is the other community that's really there. And honestly, if I'm thinking RevOps people, I'm thinking there's you, there's Rosalind Santos, who I really respect. And the list is not super wide of people I follow in RevOps. I think it's maybe people who are less into posting and more on the technical side. I could be wrong, and I'd love you to talk about. We're going to ask you like who are some people in the space we should be following. But where does this bring you to today? Talk about what it is. Where are you working? Last I heard, you're driving around the country in a Sprinter van, sort of doing your own thing, and you've rolled out sort of this pre-seed SaaS
Yeah,
solution
yeah,
called OpenView, I believe, right? So let's
yeah.
talk about it.
One view. Yep.
OneView, pardon me, OneView.
We spend a lot of time trying to help people to understand how they can get more meetings and pipeline from the sequences that they do. A lot of people don't understand what the things are that are working, which personas they should do what with, and how the sequence structure itself actually is one of the biggest reasons why conversion doesn't change when you update your messaging. So lots of companies are like, we need to optimize, we need to make everything more efficient, and they're doing that. They're spending lots of money to get there, but they're not really getting there because the main foundational problem that they're having is that they have what we call sequence decay. So they're getting a lot of past due tasks. They're not converting those sequence steps as high as they could. So we adjust the foundations, and then once the foundations are clear and the variables are less inconsistent, we do a very deep level of experimentation across all the things that they could possibly doing using AI.
You just brought something up. To me, that problem that you mentioned, which is sequence decay, tasks not getting completed in time. Two thoughts there. Number one, something that seems like one of the easiest step arounds and workarounds that I found is simply separating the sequence into email steps only and then call steps on another one, since you're really getting jammed up with calls and emails. I want to hear your thoughts on that. But also secondarily, I just think AI, when I hear that, I'm like, yeah, move it ahead with persistence and machine learning with bots. And some people don't like that. And they go, well, do you not like SDRs? And I go, no, I do. But I just think the automate tasks, get SDRs into new things. Wouldn't AI solve that problem, Remington, to keep tasks moving along?
Yeah, so two questions. First one you asked was the separating sequences. I think the important thing is there's a bajillion strategies to how you could do sequences. One of which is, like you said, split them up. The other one is the traditional Agoji sequence, like everybody uses, which is really dangerous to use because of how you said everything gets jammed up. And then there's other strategies too related to how you structure the sequence so that you've got a LinkedIn step as the very first thing, which sometimes is counterintuitive, but that does decrease the number of steps you even have to do through the rest of the sequence because first of all, you're checking if the person exists and double checking their data at the very beginning before you do anything. Second step being a call makes it so that if you are looking at their profile and the reps are comfortable making that first call, they have the potential of getting what is the highest converting step into a meeting without spending all the manual effort of doing emails and calls for a whole bunch of days. So there's different strategies. My point is that as you do those strategies, there's not a place you can currently go to track and test and keep all of the experiments that you've been doing. You don't have a place that really lives, and that's what OneView is really trying to provide. The second question about the AI thing, it's the same answer. Go and do that. Everybody should be doing that. If you're not doing AI to try to test the effectiveness against what an SDR can do, and seeing where in the market you're trying to go after, there's pieces of lower value type prospects or accounts that we don't want a person spending their time on. It's an AI driven play. Those are things that you also would want to track. Those are things you'd want to compare and experiment with. And again, that's why I think OneView is helpful. Is like you could do all of these things, and it has the ability to understand what you're doing, gives you AI analysis on how it worked. And then as you have that whole host of experiments running, you're able to more accurately depict like, okay, here's the investment we're going to make this next quarter. We're going to double down on AI. We're going to decrease the number of SDRs that we have because we have to. And we're going to invest in these other technologies to make our data better because here's the problems in our data. That sort of outcome, I think, it's a holistic problem. And all these answers are part of answering that question.
So I'm going to challenge you, and I love you, right? And we talked about this the other day. So I'm this guy who's out there sort of beating this drum that predictable revenue needs to go away. And I think there's good things about predictable revenue. I think it has done more harm than good for the majority of companies. And now let me define that. I think that early stage companies in particular started adopting it without knowing about it and not at all being the kind of company that should be in that model. So I'm going to caveat that statement with in the space I'm in. So I'm not dealing with Series C, Series D companies who are very mature, who need a well-defined, call it motion that needs to be repeated thousands of times a week. So with that, talk to me about that. Is this really in response to supporting more predictable revenue with more touches? That right now the data was what, 1,700 touches, Remington?
Yeah.
People are saying, I don't know the data source. I don't have it in front of me. 1,700 touches before you convert somebody in SaaS, just software though. Is that correct?
I think that stat was from a previous Sales Loft executive, Jeremy Donovan, or I saw one on LinkedIn about that the other day. The number of touches
That's a
that have gone up,
shitload.
it's a lot. And I don't think you're challenging me. I'm actually much more on the side of the predictable revenue model being completely broken. Part of the reason why we're creating OneView is because of that. I think when a company is trying to make the decision to move to a more modern way of thinking, which does include the AI or the machine learning elements of what our go-to-market process should be and all the content channels we could do, all the experimentation we could do from all the emails we send, all the social channels that we focus on, anything that we're tracking, all of that data is part of what we look at when we think about the go-to-market process. So I'm not coming at this from, and I've talked with Aaron Ross. I know him personally just from when I was in tech powered sales with Justin Michael. He wanted to ask me a few thoughts on the book, and we had a talk with. He actually lives in a castle in Scotland. Pretty cool guy.
Castle,
But
right? Yeah.
yeah, it's a
He's doing
castle. He
good.
moved out there with I think he has like 7 kids or something. But the predictable revenue model was back in the golden age of you could just do more volume and get more outcomes in a lot more ways than you can now. We do not live in a world like that anymore. And doing more reps with higher volume and just throwing tech and data at your revenue problem is going to be the reason why the big companies will die and the fast will eat the slow. And the stuff like Magnetic is doing, where the content strategy is a lot more focused on driving value and creating relationships of trust and understanding the content that people want to see. It's not the first, I need to get you into a call, I need to position our product, I need to do discovery, and I need to move you through a funnel. People buy differently today. 70% of the buying process is done before a sales rep is even spoken with. So if you're just pinging thousands of people with an SDR out there that's not super aware of what buying process they're even in, you don't have the intent data, you don't have it orchestrated, you don't have experiments running on what content is working, you're literally just wasting millions of dollars a year on trying to solve a problem that cannot be solved unless you start helping people buy the way they want to buy, which means investing in content. It means investing in tracking how that content is performing and knowing the type of roles that you need to hire who can be somebody who slings together this massive tech stack of things that does way more than any one human as an SDR can do. And yeah, maybe there's an SDR channel, maybe that fits into the process, but for so long, creating pipeline has been synonymous with the SDR. And I think that is shifting, and it's going to be a good shift for everybody as long as we do it the right way.
Yeah, you said the right thing there. As long as we do it the right way, not too fast. I think also you've got people like Chris Walker out there very loudly saying, like, this is a movement. We're calling it revenue. It is no longer sales and marketing, and it is RevOps, not marketing ops, right? And RevOps and sales ops. It is called RevOps. And I think a lot of people can get behind that. And then we go, cool, sounds great. How? Like that all sounds really good. How do we do that, Chris Walker? Or how do we do that, everybody? And I know that, like, I'm going down to Austin next week, and Chris and I get to have one of those 40-minute sessions where somebody interviews him, and I get to be lucky enough to do that face to face with him. And I'm going to really ask him some tough questions, Remington, about talk to me technically. If I'm an early stage company and I don't have $1 million and I just have organic, and I have a little bit of a stack, and maybe I have a fractional RevOps person, how do I pull this off in a way that I want to dig into and double click on? You mentioned a way to measure the content performance to the CRM, I'm assuming, Remington. So walk me through that from a RevOps perspective. What are some tools that you're seeing that you think are the best that companies could evaluate, or that you're seeing successful in measuring, call it organic content performance, back to a system of action, or system of record and system of action? Pardon me.
Yeah. No, I agree with the distinction, system of record, system of action. I think one thing that would be important to state for the record is that I think you can do a lot of the things I'm about to say in a lot of different technologies. It's not as much about the specific technology, it's about the innovative way that you look at what the technology can do. So whether it's I'm using the CRM of HubSpot or Salesforce or Zoho, I've had clients that use all of them. And when you build out the way you're tracking things before you go into the process of trying to do a content strategy, you think about it from one of the lenses of either account based or prospect based or channel based, whatever it is, or multiple things. You could do an integrated campaign for a set of accounts where the integrated campaign focus is we're going to push this message with these sets of content, whatever. So you get Canva, you've got some way of creating content. You have the automation potential of either a Zapier or Make or Workato, whatever tray, and you're using those preset defined lists or groups of people and accounts, and you create fields on those accounts that allow you to tag the ABM or content creation thing you're doing prior to going out and doing outbound. And then you only do the different things that you're talking about with that integrated campaign to those specific people. So you run LinkedIn ads, you go and do Facebook ads, you run your Instagram account, you have the sequences that you run, whether it comes from an SDR or multiple mailboxes of just the founder. And all of a sudden, because you created content for that campaign, like right now, I'm about to release one. If you want to watch one view and see how this works, we're about to do the new mascot for the company. I'm not going to reveal what it is right now, but our mascot is going to train people on how to do experiments and how to understand go to market experimentation from a high level. And as we go out and do that, we have very particular target accounts that we've outlined in our CRM with specific fields and tags that will allow us to know the things we did before we did it. And anybody can do that. It's really just an organization thing so that when you go and run your sequences or when you go and run your ads, you try to make sure that the focus that you use when you do that is tied back to the fields you already labeled before you did it. So that's one specific thing that I've done that has been helpful for me to track.
Tags, like you're saying, just naming it like like a hashtag, right? A tag.
Yeah, I'll give you like the tactical example. I had a spreadsheet that I listed out the campaigns that we were doing, and I wrote down the tag I was going to put in the field, which was literally just a text string. And as I typed that text string into a field in Salesforce, I now had a set of accounts that had that text string in it. and I could run all the reports I needed based on an accounts with contacts report or accounts with activities report or accounts with campaigns. All of those different reports are now segmented before somebody ever goes into a campaign, because that tag or that field has been designated as the holy grail of where I keep track of what I'm about to do. And I keep track of what tags I used so that as I go and run experiments, I don't have to wonder, who did I do those experiments to and did it work? I've got a very specific set of targeted
Yeah.
ways I'm going to go about that content before I go down the path of spending money. And then I go back and look, and it's a lot easier to do reporting. And that's something like I said, anybody with a CRM can make a new field and be more organized. That's like any founder can do it way of just like jumping into the content reporting world.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's really good tactical advice. I thought you were talking about tags in ads on LinkedIn, which I thought, well, a lot of people don't know what that is. Cause I think here's what I found, and it's really interesting. There's really, marketers know this. There's two kinds of ads, the kind you pay for and the ones you don't. Most of us are doing the ones you don't, organic content, right? Hey, I made a post. I got 4,000 views. Wow. Holy shit, somebody bought something from me. That's because you're creating these organic posts, which are advertisements. In the 50s, they called them advertisements. In 1950, it is ourself getting up and talking about how we solve a problem, yada yada, and we go, wow, how do I do that again? I wonder what I was talking about when they went and got leads, or maybe that wasn't the thing and it was something before then. And so I say, well, that's really nice because a lot of us can do it and it's quite easy. And a lot of us stumble into a lead once or twice. To do it over and over again, I think is extremely hard. But also there's a paid side to it too. And LinkedIn is now taking companies' organic posts and using these influencer campaigns, right? Hey, Remington works at my company. He made a great post. We're now going to take that and make it an advertisement. Um, Talk to me about your thoughts on that. Is it better for a company whose earlier stage, say they're about a $2 to $3 million company, to be going down organic? Let's say get their thought leader, CEO, CRO out there talking, or is it better for them to invest into a paid strategy? What is your opinion on that?
A very good tactical resource that answers a lot of questions about how we saw this work for Snowflake from an earlier stage all the way through to now where Snowflake is today is called Busting Silos. It's written by Travis Henry and Hillary Carpio. They're the directors of ABM and SDR Ops. So you can read about some of this here, but it's basically like a blueprint that shows how you can take your ICP, your set of accounts that you care about, and basically do the paid spend that you're going to do in a way that is kind of testing things before you really invest deeply. I think a lot of people think it's one or the other. I need to do this big organic or this big paid outcome that's, I need to focus on one or the other. And I don't think it's necessarily a good thing to do too many things at once. But if you have controls around an experiment, and you can put little amounts into the process of doing that ad on LinkedIn. If it's a LinkedIn ad, that's a paid ad, and it's account based. You have the ICP, you know the exact personas you're going to go after. The sequences are set up in the way they're supposed to. If you're using SDRs, or if you don't have SDRs yet, you have a controlled way you're going to try to disseminate that content to those specific people. Could be a sequence just from you as a founder. That type of testing doesn't cost you a lot of money. That's, I think, what people think. It's like, but you need somebody who knows how to do it. You need somebody who's done it before so that you're not just going and throwing spaghetti at the wall. You're not going to get so much from some of those things right away unless you start spending a lot more on them. But I don't believe as an early stage company, you can or should start spending a lot of money on any one thing until you have done that testing process. So that's what I'm doing right now as an early stage company. We're doing a lot of testing. We have a lot of things we're about to roll out in ads across different channels. And we will know by the end, because we're trying to track exactly how that works with an account based strategy. This is what type of account with what type of message will resonate. So we create our experiments around unique content. One of the things we're going to do for our AI chat agent is give people the ability to enter into a prompt bounty. It's like a contest where they can share AI prompts that ask questions about your go-to-market data. And we're going to go and test that with big companies who
Yeah.
have thought leaders that could be really good fits to participate in that bracket contest that brings together everybody's questions that they wish they could answer about go-to-market data. And then we'll use that to train our AI. It'll be perfect for our product vision, but it's also going to let me see how well getting somebody involved in like a gamified thought leadership thing works for that specific type of ICP. I'm going to do that with 6 or 7 other things that we've already created in our scoping. So I don't know if that helps answer the question you asked about paid versus social, but I think the problem is more like being creative and being organized and testing a little bit here and there as you go, and then swinging harder and faster at things once you find what actually works and doing more of it.
I'm going to ask you a tough question. This is kind of supporting what we do. There is you said something at the beginning of the sequence question I asked you. You said, well, if you start with the LinkedIn step, and there's a lot of reasons to do that. I think and develop the company around that LinkedIn step should come from the founder, and that message and the connection in the ICP should come into their ICP. Doesn't mean that SDRs can't also go there, but we found that when you have a C in front of your title, you're going to get 40 to 60% connect rate as a male, 50 to 78% as a female. If you're an SDR, we found out that you're 20 to 35% if you're a male, 40 to 70% if you're a female. And those are big ranges because we just have some, 6 months of data across. I'd say about 32 users in our population, along with some bots that are females, which is interesting, right? That we were sort of testing. People said, well, that kind of sounds sexist. I said, nope, I'm just giving you data. I'm literally just giving you data points. A data point is their sex and how they identify. And LinkedIn does not have the field of sex. Let's talk about it. I want to talk about it because every other platform lets you choose, is it a male or a female? LinkedIn does not give you that. And I do think in business, we talk to males and females differently. And it's interesting to me. And I'm just going to ask that question as a data point that can be valuable to RevOps. Do you think sort of understanding if someone is male or female, not why they're male or female, don't care. They think it's great. You can be anything. But does that matter when you're sourcing data as a RevOps or a marketing ops person?
Just to clarify too, before I answer, are you talking about like how it doesn't have the data field you can pull? Or are you saying like the he, him, she, her, they, them thing, that where you're talking about that? Or
Pardon me, the data, yeah, the exact data field, like are you male or female, right? So like
got it,
Facebook, I can choose male or female, for example. Instagram, I
got it.
can choose male or female. LinkedIn makes it hard because I'm advertising differently to males and females on every other channel, except LinkedIn wants to say, oh, everybody receives information the same.
Hmm. Yeah, I think
It's sort of my argument. You see what I'm saying?
it's a good question, and I do think it's a topic that has a lot of socially important things to be aware of with some of the ways that, especially for, I'll give you an example. One of my previous bosses that I had a really hard time getting promoted because she was a female from a different ethnicity and she had been passed up for jobs that she was for sure qualified for. And I think when it comes to thinking about like what it's like to be in the job market, especially in a leadership role in a company, or trying to think about how that reflects our ICP and the data around what we care and think about, I certainly think it's helpful to understand the market. Like I know a lot about the market that I'm going into is going to be predominantly male in the types of people that I talk with, but those female voices or people who identify in that other category of non-white male binary, whatever, those people are trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to make their space in the world and make the things that they're doing with their career something that is valuable to the people around them, in spite of sometimes not being seen as
Yep.
valuable. And other times, those people are seen as valuable, but maybe they assume that they're not. So there's so many dynamics that go into that.
Yeah.
But the answer to like, is it an important data point?
Yeah.
I do think it's a data point you can use. It depends on what you're using it for. And I don't know if I have an opinion on if LinkedIn should add that per se or not. I think it's a tricky topic to even like think about ads based on gender when you're starting to do some of those things, or the way people identify. So I don't know. That is a tough question. I'm glad you're asking it. I'm curious too what your thoughts are on it as well.
Well, my thoughts are I would like to potentially be able to write differently, maybe more of a feminine and nurturing tone to females, and maybe more of a masculine and alpha tone, because I know that sort of stuffy male, confident tone that can come across in email can really be a turnoff, right? And I know that especially if a female is getting that, sometimes they go, well, I don't, that's not language I can identify with. And so I call them feminine and masculine tones, for lack of a better sort of way, or more of a nurturing tone versus that pushy, right? Tone. And it really goes back to the connects. And I say, actually, I'm not trying to be sexist. I don't think it has anything to do with whether or not somebody wants to secretly have an affair with somebody on LinkedIn. I think it's that men trust women more because they're more nurturing and they're more careful. And they don't just come in and go, hey, Remington, let's meet. I got to hit a quota. And I think that there's a lot to that in sort of how we need to perceive the role of sales and the language we're using, and what you said, which is the world's not working that way anymore. We're not responding to this confident beating over the head.
Yeah. I think that thinking about it is a good thing. And generally, my philosophy training from my undergrad taught me that um, there's a lot of logic that you can use to justify a lot of viewpoints. But the key is, like what Socrates said, knowing that you don't know and being willing to understand that wisdom is in knowing that you don't know things, and being open to realizing that equality and um, the morals of our society have room to grow in a lot of ways. As I think as we focus on keeping some of those important principles where they should be, and seeing everybody as human, and allowing the voices and opinions of all, regardless, those, as long as those types of principles are prioritized and we think about that, the element of thinking about this tone thing with relation to the background somebody has, it's very similar to if you were to ask, does that person know sports or not? Can I use a sports analogy? Or is that person somebody who's coming from a small town or a big town? Somebody that's got a city experience where they would understand some different types of context versus not. There's other, like, you could bring a bunch of examples in there. If they're younger or older, did they experience a world war or not, or whatever? You know, those types of questions in
Wow.
marketing are
Now you're
always
getting now you're
there.
getting into the next question. You're giving me the perfect segue, Remington. I am dying to talk about this. Here's the last question because we're going to unwind it. And you teed it up perfectly. There's software out there that has been trying, at least I've tried it for about 2.5, 3 years now, to give me data that tells me at scale, for example, who are the people who are in my ICP, who are more leading edge, who are more influential, who are more in line with my brand voice, in line with my content voice. And there's a tool called Wrench AI. A little bit of an endorsement only because I'm saying we've used it, we've liked it enough to say the data is super interesting, right? So I want your thoughts on this. So we call this a mini consult where people can hear me ask you the question, and we'll break this play down and record it and kind of roll it out and act like this is me asking for your expertise, because it is. So we go out for 3 months on outbound. We are ghostwriting content for the CEO. We are interviewing podcast guests and featuring that in their ICP. And we take all that data and ingest it. We take all of their posts and ingest it. We take all of their website and ingest it. And we say, who's everybody out there whose voice lines up? And then we score it with the brand and the personal brand of that person. And then we take that subset and say, okay, there's our influencers. There's who we want on podcasts, because we can now leverage their reach. There's our early adopters. So if that's the technology, which oftentimes it is for us, that's who we want to run to. My question is this: do you think there's a lot of validation in that kind of software, or do you think we're still early to be able to use that? Because there is a lot of companies who are investing into that right now, hoping that that is sort of the key that unlocks the future of prospecting.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of data like this with a couple of the clients that I worked with that were B2C, because in the B2C space too, it's very critical that you have certain data points on. Um, like one of the clients I worked with had a company that they needed to know certain elements of this specific age group, what their background was and what things they're interested in and what purchases they've made and other things. And there was like this question of, how do I find that data?
Yeah.
Mainly because when you only have so much marketing spend, you don't want it to like be a shotgun that hits a wall and some of the things that hit the target. You want it to be more like a sniper rifle. Like, I know
Mm-hmm.
exactly who I'm going to go after and here's how I'm
Yeah.
going to go after them. The hard thing is until you also know your own focuses and your own specific ways you'd want to go about using a data tool like that, I bet a lot of companies who are still trying to tie their shoes with sales sequences and are focused on the predictable revenue model, their operations people are probably not going to be on the cutting edge of using that type of tool as easily as maybe somebody like you. So I think just being careful with investments
Yeah.
and using it according to the use case that you really know needs to be solved, and finding ways to validate
Yep.
if the use case you're solving is really being solved first. And same thing, like I've said with everything, experiment, invest more after you get some results, and then double down deeper. So I think if a data company is bringing that type of approach and that type of opportunity, yeah, critical, very valuable, because it's just a new cut on the ICP instead of us saying the typical industry, company size, revenue, whatever. Let's
Yeah.
expand that and say, okay, we have all of that, but within that, what's the next layer down? And I think that that's a really interesting thing to be able to
Yeah.
provide if it's accurate.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear your thoughts on that because I've seen value on it. I know for our clients, it's helped to identify people quickly who are willing to be on a podcast. And maybe that's more of that ego and they're already a little bit outspoken, pardon me, or they have a personal brand that they're trying to get out there. So instead of manually researching that, it sort of just says, like, that's these people. Yeah. And as humans, like you said, at B2C, they've been doing this for decades. And we have seen now B2B start to borrow from B2C now for a good
Mhm.
while. And I think this is the next phase of that sort of instead of assuming and having these big fat wallets to go waste a bunch of money, quite frankly, we have to get better. We have to, your point, get more of a sniper rifle than a wide spray because we've seen the reports and the studies that people are wasting infinite amount of money and really with no consequence. And you just go, okay, well, that didn't work out. I mean, sure, anybody can sit down and click on LinkedIn ads with enough money, and you're going to capture some of your market if you have product market fit. And that's sort of the value when you have product market fit is now you can go unlock the user pool and go get 5% of that market and start to target people specifically in specific competitor buckets and design your product around the weaknesses in your competitor. And to your point, those learnings you have, and I think that gets so exciting for early stage companies, but they forget the simple things, Remington, like what you said, which is, hey, how do you get a sequence that works? And that you can replicate it before you go think about intent data, before you go think about these other things. I'm going to ask one more question to you because we, in content, I think this is a super valuable question. And for outbound too, there is free intent data, call it included now with Apollo. A lot of people don't understand what that intent data is or the quality of it. And I love Apollo. You love Apollo. Let's talk about that so people understand very accurately from a RevOps person. What is the value of that intent data call versus paid intent data that gets much more specific?
We're just talking about the Apollo versus other paid. That's what you want to talk about within the intent data question?
Let's identify like what is the data? Yeah, what is the data that's available to us as intent data in Apollo versus what's available to us everywhere else, and then how would we use it? And what do you see as like the use case for each? Maybe that would be a good way to wind up here.
The best use case for intent data is when it's coupled with the context of the other data that you really care about context in the accounts or the people that you're trying to focus on, the campaign that you're focused on. And at Snowflake, we did build a lot of things around the paid intent data we had from Bombora as well as Sixth Sense and other different intent data providers. We saw the power of when you put that intent data in context of a go-to-market motion that you know you're trying to execute, and there's a specific way you plan to use that intent data. Again, that's where you can see if the intent data is helpful or not. I think with the Apollo free intent data, it's something that, especially for a group of people who are just barely getting their understanding of intent data, like, whoa, I can see what people are searching for online based on what company they're at, and I can see what those searches were. That's a new concept for a lot of people. I was just talking with the client I have yesterday where I told him what we were going to set up was using Apollo. We're going to create the intent data process for him to help him find some different specific consulting clients that do a very particular thing. And we're going to see how well it works based on the responses that he gets from the type of engaged sequences he's going to do in Apollo. And then after that, we make a decision of do you need other intent data as well? So for people that are just getting into this, 99 bucks a month, you get a full ICP creation tool in Apollo. You get the whole intent data suite. You can do the contact data from any account that you want to go after. That's the first place to start. You don't have to spend on Zoom Info, Salesforce, Outreach. you've got it all right from the beginning. I think companies using that gives them that first step into something further, but it's just hard for them to get there. So I always recommend to everybody, don't hire somebody full time. Don't spend your money on a full-time hire yet. Go and find a person that's done consulting. It doesn't need to be somebody like me too. It can be somebody that's maybe earlier stage that you know that just has a general concept of go to market, or you can spend a lot of money on somebody that knows a lot about what they're doing. If you hire that person first, you run experiments, you know your ICP, then when you hire a team, your time to like grow RevOps. Apollo intent data was at the center of how you started. It was cheap, easy to use, and then when you hire somebody, that whole process can be something that can be iterated on. So I love it. I think it's changing the game, and it's actually a really disruptive release that Apollo has brought to the market recently.
Love that. I love it. I would love to hear that from someone like you because I know you know your shit. So Remington, thank you so much. Okay, where can everybody find you when they want to go find you and go, man, that guy's smart. I'm going to go hire him to help us as a consultant. Where can they find you today?
Yeah, if you go to the oneviewhq.com website, you can request a demo or schedule a time with me. You can also go to my LinkedIn and follow me there, whatever works best for you. And love to give you that sample audit like we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah, there's that triangle. I love it. Remington Rawlings. That's a hard name to forget too. Sounds like a baseball pitcher. Um,
Yeah,
I love it,
exactly.
Remington. Thanks so much for coming on the show and spending some time, man. I know you're one of the great minds that I'd say you're top two or three in my book. So thank you for spending time on us. It means a lot to me to have you hop on the show today, brother. So we'll be seeing you around LinkedIn, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you in one of our sequences dumping into your tool very soon because I know we talked about that, and I'm looking forward to it. So thank you again, Remington.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate your time as well.